Well, hello and welcome, everybody. I want to welcome you back to really what's kind of part two of a conversation within a longer conversation on the Sermon on the Mount. I'm with John Bowles from Beggar's Table. I'm Rustin Smith from Vox Day Community. And last week, we kind of took a step off a ledge a little bit into the deeper parts of the Sermon on the Mount because we spent quite a long time on the Beatitudes, which is the long introduction to the Sermon on the Mount. And last week, what Jesus does is he does this parenthetical pause before he goes into giving real practical instruction about what it's like to live as people of the Beatitudes in a world that's not going to understand that.
Right.
They might even persecute you. And what he did in that parentheses was he talked about his relationship to the law. Do you remember maybe the thrust of that or the...
Yeah.
How would you sum that up, John?
Well, yeah, it's him taking a step back.
Yeah.
And it's almost like he's saying, don't worry, if you think that I have come to do away with this thing that you hold most sacred, which is the law, I have not come to do away with that. But instead, I'm drawing our attention to what's most important, and that's our heart. And we can be people of heart and not just rule followers. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's good. And I remember you said that the law was given as kind of a map of reality. And laws, as we said, like with stop signs or wearing a mask, that they're signs that signify, they point to a value that we have. So, wearing a mask shows that you value self-sacrifice for your neighbor.
Yes.
Or inconvenience for others, or if you stop at a stop sign, what you're really saying is I value the dignity of each human life, and I don't want to do damage to that.
That's really good.
Okay.
You're reminding me of what we talked about. Yes, exactly. That was it. The idea that there's something more important, or maybe just equally important, as our individual rights, and that's our sense of shared responsibility.
Shared responsibility
causes us to sacrifice some of our individual rights. So yeah.
Yeah. Good. Well, that's where we are. And then now it seems like Jesus is going to go ahead and go into a new kind of section.
And the thing about this section that we're going into, Rustin, is that, as you know, this is where Jesus really begins to remold the way that they're thinking and the way they imagine.
Yeah.
And which means that he's knocking down their systems of belief, which is what Jesus is always doing. And I really think that this is an opportunity for us to bring in, to help us with this teaching, is to bring into this conversation a very theological, or not theological, but there's a very academic word, and that's epistemology.
Okay.
So epistemology, and the reason I want to talk about it is because I want to talk about this concept of epistemic closure.
Okay.
So hopefully all this will make sense once we get going. First of all, epistemology. What is epistemology?
Well, so
you're a learned man.
You got the ology, so there's a study of, and so epistemology is really a conversation about how we know what we know, right?
Right. That's great. The study of how we know.
How we know.
And how we know what we know. So when we talk about epistemic closure, what that phrase basically means is that we have cut off our knowing. We know what we know to a certain degree, and it's like a dead end.
Yeah.
We've closed down avenues of new learning.
Yeah. So in other words, anything that we learn after epistemic closure is just going to be referential to that which we already know. Like we already have the framework for everything that we could ever possibly encounter, and that is contained inside of our box, and that's called epistemic closure. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we'll cut off pathways to know more, or we'll take new information, like you said, and we'll incorporate it into what we already know.
Yeah.
But the point is we won't know new things. We won't know more things. And that's
the danger of it.
That's what happens to us, and happens to us so often, especially around our systems of belief. Because you know as well as I do, is that our belief systems, our belief structures, we hold those dearly, right? I mean, and the reason that we hold those dearly is because they usually make us feel comforted.
Yeah.
They make us feel secure.
Yeah.
I mean, you think of all the reasons.
Well,
What are the things that people use religion for?
Well, I'm thinking like at some point, the things that I have learned in some cases have been salvation to me.
Yeah, right.
They've improved my life or saved my life or saved my relationships. Or,
Yeah.
Right. So those things are dear to me that I know
Yeah.
these principles or these ways
Yeah,
of
so
thinking.
epistemology is closely related to meaning.
Mhm.
And so when we know things, it gives our life meaning. So
Okay.
that kind of things are dear to us.
Yeah.
And we use our religion for safety and security and to feel loved, belonging, all of those things. And that's one of the reasons why I think that we close ourselves down, epistemologically speaking. We close ourselves
Okay.
down because I don't want to know anything that disrupts that.
Okay.
So
Right.
just this last week, I was in a conversation with a friend of mine
Uh-huh.
who was telling me a story of a friend of hers. And she said that her friend was going through some courses that were causing her to know Jesus differently than she had grown up with. And she said her friend said, "You're destroying Jesus for me.
Yeah.
Stop. I can't." She wanted to just stop. Like, I
Yeah.
can't just stop talking.
Right.
It almost like she was saying, it doesn't matter if it's truth or not. It's destroying my Jesus. And when I heard that, I just laughed, but I laughed sympathetically because I feel like that's what we do a lot in the church. And we like, no, we want to know the Jesus that we know.
Yeah.
And then we don't want to know anymore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I do.
You do, unfortunately.
Yes. Yeah.
I think the ironic thing about this, and this ties in with the Matthew passage that we'll look at today, is that I experience Jesus as always blowing up people's systems of belief.
Right.
That's what he's doing. It's like people throughout human history, people have done this.
Yeah.
And Jesus comes along, and he was anything but comforting, Rustin.
Yeah.
He didn't comfort people. He says, "Oh, your system of belief, I'm going to completely disrupt that."
Yeah.
And then, and I think it's because once we start finding all of our security and peace in a system, that system has become for us a kind of God.
Yeah.
And we start really worshiping that system more than we worship with open hands the God of all the living things,
Yeah.
and the God of reality. And I feel like Jesus intentionally blows up people's belief systems so that he can cause us to go, what? But we got open hands, and now we're in that place of self-emptying that we need to be in to receive the fullness of Christ.
Yeah.
I don't know. So that's, I
Yeah.
sound like a pastor right now, but
Yeah.
that's just so I think that you and I have a difficult job. I think that, this is the thing. And so forgive me for being on a little bit of a soapbox here, but in the Western church, our job is perceived as providing a system of belief that we bring people into. And you know as well as I do, that system itself can be different in different churches, but we have a system, usually linked with our denomination, that we really believe, and we bring you into that so that you believe these things and find peace, security, belonging, and love. And first of all, I want to say all of that is good. That's not bad. Again, this isn't binary. This isn't either or.
Right.
That's good. It's good for us. That's
not
part
only good, but necessary.
It's necessary, right? That's part of our job.
Yeah.
That's a good and necessary thing to say. Here is a belief system, and that's one of the reasons that we say creeds and doctrines, or even that we pray the prayers that we pray on Sundays. Because this is who we are. This is what we believe.
Yeah.
But I think there's another part of our job that I think has largely been left out of the Western church, and it makes what we do really hard. Because I think part of our job is to, at the same time, blow up systems of belief and cause people to go, oh, I can't be too secure in that because there's, and to have those open hands that go, we don't know.
So this makes me think. At Vox, we have these 6 orienting words that we teach people as they're coming through and getting into the church. One of the words, and I think it's the first word we begin with, is the word mystery. And by that we mean, and we'll say that Christianity is more, it's not so much an explanation as it is an encounter. And I want to say it is both an explanation and an encounter. In fact, you and I spend a lot of time teaching about how Christianity does explain so much of reality. It explains why good novels are good novels, and we're very C.S. Lewis-like in that way, right? That we believe in Christianity as we believe in the sun, not only because we see it, but by it we see all things. So
Yeah.
Christianity does offer explanations for things, but more than an explanation, it must be an encounter, a run-in with the living God.
Yeah.
And I think this is kind of bold, and I don't mean this in a judgmental way, but I think you can just usually very quickly tell the difference between somebody who has embraced Christianity as an explanation and somebody who has actually had an encounter with the risen Christ. And
Yes.
I think that's something that we need to be challenged by, all of us, all the time.
Yeah.
Because the result of relying on the explanation Christianity versus the encounter Christianity is epistemic closure.
Yeah.
We can get really comfortable with knowing what we know and then not be open to what is actually real.
Yeah. And my default is explanation Christianity because that's the way I was brought up.
Yeah.
And but you just introduced me to this concept of thick and clear religion. Why don't you expand on that?
Okay,
But speaking of C.S. Lewis, I think you got it from him.
That was a C.S. Lewis thing,
Yeah.
right? He was a European, and so he drew the line between the different expressions of religion in the world as he observed it. One he called thick religion.
Yeah.
By that he meant thick as in you can't see into it. It's mystery. He would point to religions in that sense that were very experiential, even extreme, religions that had orgies or ecstatic experiences, or
We might call them primitive.
we would, yeah. He called them belly-centered or
Belly-centered,
gut-centered, playing on your bodily desires even. That he called thick religion.
Thick religion.
The other religion he called clear religion, and he would say that was like the religion of Europe that he grew up in, which was philosophical, but he would include in that Buddhism and religions that are about clear thinking and clearing the mind and explanation. Thick religion is the religion of encounter and experience. Clear religion is the religion of explanation and logic and reason.
Yeah.
Now he said that those who came from thick religion needed clear religion. They needed explanation of why they were doing what they were doing and to understand it and in order to flourish. But he said for himself, being a stodgy kind of English guy,
Yeah.
he needed an encounter with thick religion. He knew all the head stuff, but he needed the gut level encounter
The
of
mystery.
thick religion.
Yeah.
Now, Lewis, I think, would point out, maybe he did, or I'm ascribing this to him, that this is very Jesus. Jesus goes around explaining quite a lot. He's very reasonable in some ways. He teaches how to live practically, and we're going to see that some even in this next section. And so that's clear religion. He's philosophical, he's reasonable. And then he'll turn around and say, drink my blood. That's thick religion.
Right.
That's mystery.
Right.
That's encounter.
Yeah.
And it's why churches like ours still emphasize what we call the sacraments. Now, I don't know about you, John. When I was ordained, the traditional ordination is you're ordained, you're set apart to do the work of being a minister of the word and the sacrament. It's another way of saying of the clear and the thick.
Yeah, I like
of
that.
the explanation and the encounter.
I like that.
Right?
Yeah.
And funny enough, I grew up in a tradition that was really wary of thick religion.
Sure.
And so even my ordination certificate says a minister of the word.
It left out the sacrament part.
Left out the sacrament.
Well, Rustin, when you're talking, I just think, I grew up just assuming that Jesus and religion was all about clear religion, that it was all about explanation, because that was the only thing that was glorified. But it's I like this idea that we need both, but not just. I think we need that as people, as humans, because I think that. That's where I developed my love of stories and in music. Like I went to movies for my thick,
Oh,
that's
good.
where
you encountered God.
That's where I encountered God. That's where I felt emotion.
Yeah.
Like I could sit in church all the time and take notes.
Right.
But if I wanted to cry, I went to movies.
Yeah.
Or listen to music. That was all the thick. And the church largely was always kind of void of any kind of rich storytelling, the kind of music that would pierce my heart. That I mean, and that's not necessarily the story of everyone, but that was certainly my story.
Yeah.
And just going, oh, these.
Well, I think that's the ongoing conversation of things like worship, and do we veer too far into the experiential? And I mean, people that I love and admire have warned against that, and that we need explanation, we need reason, we need sound doctrine, we need good teaching. But it can go both ways. Like, you can really go into the ditch on either side of this road, right?
You can, but I was going to ask you, can you share that story about the baptismal font at your church growing up?
Right.
That's such a good...
Yeah, so when I was a kid, I grew up in an independent Christian church that had a baptismal. So they're the sort of people that, like, if you're ready to get baptized, you were ready to go. You got the tank filled, and, right? So there's built-in baptismal in the back of the sanctuary. I don't know all the language for all this stuff because I grew up in an independent Christian church. There are words for the stage and all that. But our baptismal was behind this thick curtain, like a velvety blue curtain. And the only time that curtain was ever opened is when there was a baptism. Mm-hmm. And in fact, on the back wall of the baptism was this a mural that some group from, like a high school group from the 70s had drawn. So it was white hippie Jesus.
Awesome.
And baptizing somebody in the Jordan. But you never got to see that week to week.
Yeah.
You only got to see the curtain come open when somebody was getting baptized. And so what that did to me as a kid was it gave me this real sense of reverence. And there was mystery. There was something going on back there that we're not allowed to go back there until this one special thing happens. Yeah. It was set apart. It was holy. Yeah. Right? And so that curtain would come open and somebody would get dunked in this water and brought up, and that got to me. And so when I remember getting baptized in that place, and that being really meaningful to me, that now I am stepping into this place that is mysterious. And of course, it's just, I got older and I worked at that church one summer, and still love that place. But I got to know, like, I can look back here during the week, and there's nothing to it. It's just a tub, and it's a silly mural, and right.
But still, it says a lot about you that that whether the people that worked at the church treated that as really holy or not.
Yeah.
First of all, it's the architecture is designed to give that impression.
That's right.
And you as a kid, you have that sense of wanting thick religion, and you're placing that on the experience. You're feeling that without anyone explaining it to you.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thick preceded the clear for me, but that probably is more about my wiring than the context that I grew up in.
Yeah, so all of that to say, I think that what we're fighting against is epistemic closure, and we want we don't want to close our pathways of knowing.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the role of thick religion is, maybe this could be argued both ways, but I think of thick religion as the religion of encounter, and that's the thing that blows apart your systems. Yeah. It's always the encountering something new that you could not account for it within the framework of what you already knew. And that leaves you, I love the posture you made, it leaves you like this, ready to receive something that is totally new.
Yeah, and I think that's where Jesus wanted everyone, was like this. And I think that that's a posture, no matter what you do when you're singing worship songs, that's from a genuine posture that's really scary for people.
That's right.
And I totally get that. I totally get that. It's taken me forever. Yeah. And I'm still working on being like this. And every time something comes along that blows something else up for me, it's. I think that's a lifelong journey, right?
Yeah, it is. It's either that or you end up spending so much energy guarding your rigid boundaries of what you know that you know that you're. And that's an exhausting way to live. A lot of people live that way. Yeah, and sometimes I do.
And that exhaustion pays a toll. We can see it in different ways, but it definitely pays a toll. I think it pays a toll on pastors too, who feel that their job is solely to make people stay in that rigid system. You know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah, it's good stuff. All of that to say,
that was a deep sigh. Yeah, but that's a sigh of caring and love. And you walk with a lot of people through this, and there's a. I think what's behind that expression is this is the hard stuff. The reality is difficult, and as pastors we get to walk with one another and with people through just the encounter of reality.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that comes in just the silly things like, not silly, but milestones of life that changes, graduation, empty nesting. But sometimes it comes as like the unexpected results from the doctor, or we've all been through it. There are these things that crack open what is, and leave you in a place where you can either fight to keep hold of everything you've got, or you can open your hands and receive what it is that God has for you in that moment. And that's painful stuff, and it's why we need one another when we encounter it.
Well, that's well said, cracking open what is. I like that. We are in this section of Matthew where Jesus is about to do that. I mean, he already has to a great degree.
Yeah.
But whenever he starts this language of saying, you have heard it said, referring to the law, but I say. So just imagine somebody coming with the Bible today and saying first, hey, I respect the Bible. I'm not taking anything away from the Bible. I love the Bible, and I'm not taking one pin stroke away from the Bible. Now, you've heard the Bible says this, but I'm going to say this. I mean, imagine.
That's not going to go well around here.
It's not going to go. At the very least, we have to reword that. But the way the Sermon on the Mount comes to us is that's the language Jesus is using, which helps to establish his authority.
That's
right. But it's also it's challenging people's closure, and it's bringing a thick faith right into their world, a thick religion. Yeah. And it's going to rock your world, you know. Yeah. But really, what he's doing, as we said in our last teaching, is that he is he's getting to the heart of what the law was always about. Yeah. Yeah. So where should we take it from here?
Yeah. Well, I think what is happening now is Jesus is going to get into what we have just teased as like this practical way to live into this beatitude kind of life. This next section is actually known in the academy as the great antitheses.
That's right.
You remember that?
Yep.
So the great antitheses are when Jesus gets into this long section, and I don't think we'll get very far into it today, but it's that you have heard it was said this, or the scriptures say this, but I tell you. Yeah. And that pattern is something that he jumps into. It was a common way that people taught, but Jesus is kind of taking it to his own liking here.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, he cuts to the chase. Yeah. I mean, we're talking about the pivotal human experiences here. He'll talk about anger and sex and revenge and the whole deal.
All of it. Right. All the good stuff that gets...
Johnny Cash songs.
The Johnny Cash songs. Yeah. The rated R movies.
Yeah. Exactly. So...
Yeah, so, I mean, how should we get into this? Let's just jump in.
Okay. You want to read a little?
Let's just go bit by bit, shall we? Okay. So starting in verse 21.
Yeah.
Matthew 5:21. You've heard that it was said to the people long ago. And so there he's setting up this pattern. You've heard that it was said.
You've heard it said.
You shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. Now that's right out of the Ten Commandments, right? Yeah. So he's not digging deep. He's going to something that is a ringer. They all know that. Everybody knows. Yeah. You're not supposed to murder. But he goes on. But I tell you, and that's what makes it the antithesis.
You've heard it said, but I say.
But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Well, now that's tricky because I got angry like yesterday.
Did you really? I got angry driving over here because people weren't speeding.
Yeah. Yeah. So. Anger is certainly not bad, is it? I mean, aren't there good reasons to be angry, especially these days? Anger is not always a bad thing. Right. But Jesus is saying if you even get angry, what in the world is he talking about? Well, I think you have to read on, right? So he says again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, Raka, is answerable to the court. And anyone who says, you fool, will be in danger of the fire of hell.
Yeah. This harsh words.
We've come a long way from blessed are the meek.
Yeah, right. We have, haven't we? It feels that way anyway.
So calling somebody a fool now is going to get you thrown into hell. That's odd to me, first of all, because the Bible calls all sorts of people fools. And so, in fact, Jesus calls people fools, and Proverbs calls people fools, and calling people fools is all over Scripture.
Yeah. So maybe a lot of this hinges on this word raka and what that means.
Yeah. It's an Aramaic word.
Aramaic word.
Yeah.
Yeah. That in my understanding, it's very hard to translate.
Yeah.
But it comes out something like nothingness, emptiness.
Yeah.
Which, in other words, it's a word that immediately dehumanizes someone, takes away their value. So it's not saying like, hey, you who has great human potential but is just messing up right now.
Yeah.
It's saying you who have,
you lovable idiot. Let me correct you and put you on the right.
The lovable idiot, right? It's saying you with no worth, no value. There's a nothingness there.
A nothingness,
right?
Emptiness. So this is akin to, calling the immigrant at the border an animal.
Exactly.
It's dehumanizing. It's not seeing them as beloved of God, carrying the image of God. It's seeing them as something less than human.
Exactly what Nazis said about the Jews in the Holocaust and that kind of thing. Well, I can justify my actions because they're not people.
Yeah. So I just think this is so important because good Christian kids like me have probably been taught all our lives that anger is not okay. Mm-hmm. And I can just tell you from experience that when anger is not something that you can draw upon when necessary and needed, you can find yourself in all sorts of positions where abuse is going to happen. Anger is a God-given response to something that is wrong that needs to change.
Oh, you're saying that if somebody actually lives into this attitude that it's wrong to ever be angry.
Don't ever be angry or you're sinning.
You probably subject yourself to some abuse.
You do.
Yeah.
It's just inevitable almost.
That's good. Yeah.
So that's not to say that we should act out of anger. Mm-hmm. Dallas Willard said one time that there's nothing that can be done with anger that can't be done better without it.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
That's
I
true,
think that's largely true.
Largely.
But I don't want to come off as like saying if you're angry, you're sinning. That's not at all true. Certainly Jesus experienced anger, and anger is an appropriate response to something that's not right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Along those same lines, I would say calling a situation, let alone a person, what it is or what they are. If somebody is a fool, naming them a fool. To a degree, that's we are not advocating. Jesus would never advocate that we are not describers of reality.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And you may want to protect your child by saying, "Don't listen to that friend. He's foolish."
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So what's behind it, though, is I think what you're getting at, that this raka bit is a dehumanizing word. It's dismissive. It's not saying like, "You fool, let me help you." Mm-hmm. It's saying you're not even worthy of being helped.
Right. I think it's a word theologically that goes back to maybe the greatest sin that we could do to one another, and that is stripping the image of God away from a person. So we're all created in the Imago Dei, and looking at someone and saying, you do not have the image of God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think what Jesus is condemning, I think we're agreeing on this,
that
what he's not condemning is anger. What he's condemning is not an insult. He's condemning an attitude. Yeah. And it's an attitude that is dismissive of other. It's condescending. It's apathetic. When Jesus said, "You fool," it's out of deep concern for the person that he wants to redirect. Mm. And even those who meant him harm, while on the cross, he said, "Father, forgive them." Jesus is always acting out of love, which is acting for the good of the other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if I could just take a moment to tie that back into our persecution, where we left off the Beatitudes.
Yeah.
And this is a commentary on that. When we are misunderstood by the culture around us because we're living according to another kingdom, we cannot respond by saying they just don't count.
Yeah, that's right.
They're not quote unquote Christians, so God's not with them, or God's not in them. That would be the equivalent of saying raka.
Yeah.
Right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Jesus wholeheartedly condemns that. Now that's, I don't know if you would say that's a more extreme law than the law do not murder. What I think we're trying to say is the law do not murder is the stop sign, which signifies this greater thing, which is we're to care for one another in the image of God. We're to contend for the image of God in one another.
Yeah.
It's not enough just to not murder. Hopefully everybody's going to not murder. I haven't murdered anybody yet, and I hope to keep the streak going. But
there's so many things to say right there.
But what Jesus is after is something deeper. Of course, he doesn't want me to murder anybody. He's not doing away with the law. He's after this thing in me that was always going to be tempted to dismiss somebody totally, rather than to work for their good.
Right.
Yeah.
It's almost like murder is just the ultimate playing out of dismissal of another person.
That's right.
But if that's the extreme way over here, Jesus is saying, well, don't go to any of the. I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't even begin.
Yeah.
Like be transformed into the kind of person who doesn't need to be told don't murder.
Right.
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 Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know if we want to walk through all the examples he gives.
Maybe it's enough to press into that piece, because this is that bit. I think you've taught this before. I may have gotten it from you, but it's this little parable, modern parable about the acorn.
Yeah.
Do you remember this?
I do.
Do you know it well enough to recall it?
I think so. I just said that I could. Well, I think that what we're talking about is the acorn is this example. We can't really, if you have two acorns, they're both acorns, right?
Yeah.
And
and they're remarkable because like I've got a oak tree in my front yard, and it has these little acorns, and they're remarkable because from that little acorn, this giant organism can spring. There's a sense in which you look at an acorn and you're like, the whole tree is in there.
That's an amazing thing. But to our point, you can't call one acorn good or one bad.
Right.
If they're both equal, they're both acorns.
Yeah.
One acorn might grow a huge tree, but it grew that huge tree because it fell on really fertile soil.
Yeah.
And the conditions were just right for it to grow into a great tree. Whereas another acorn falls into cement or a parking lot, and it doesn't grow into a big tree, but it's not that acorn's fault. It's the conditions around those acorns.
Yeah.
So
you can have the same exact acorns.
Yeah.
One ends up being a tree. One ends up being nothing, just rotting on the concrete.
Right.
But they're the same thing. So the metaphor is what? Like you take a guy watching the U.S. Open, and you give him a 6-pack and put him in his easy chair. No offense to golf, I guess, but and that guy, he gets drunk and he's just a grumpy drunk.
Yeah.
No big deal. You give a 6-pack to a guy in a bar where another guy's flirting with his wife, and that guy is a murderer.
Yeah.
Same guy, one is in a condition where murder's going to happen, and one's in a condition where it won't happen.
Yeah.
So what we're after there is that it's the same acorn. It's the same untransformed person, just given the right circumstances. Yeah,
the metaphor helps us to not get judgy, and it helps us to know that we all need this teaching, and to be careful before we judge the heart.
Yeah.
I think it was C.S. Lewis that said, don't judge a man where he is because we have no idea how far he's come, right?
Yeah.
So, I live a pretty comfortable life, Rustin. I could complain about it to you if I want to, and Lord knows I do enough. But I'm an entitled white male that lives in an upper middle class neighborhood, and I'm able to give my family certain things. And so I walk around feeling really good about myself. Like, John Bowles is a pretty darn good guy. I've got my stuff together, and you don't find me, you don't find me picking fights, and you don't find me getting really angry or committing adultery or taking people to court or any of these things, because I'm so good.
Yeah.
But you know what? I can remember the other day. The Royals lost a game. That's it. The Royals lost a game, and they should have won. And they blew it.
Mhm.
And nothing makes me more mad than the bullpen blowing a game.
Yeah.
And I got really mad and I lashed out at my son.
Mm.
And
The conditions were right.
what does that say about what's
Yeah,
really
for your-
going on in me?
yeah.
Where something so small as the Royals losing a game could set me off
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah.
Whereas this guy who I might be judging because he has a criminal record
Yeah.
can handle the Royals. I
Yeah.
mean, whose heart is worse?
Yeah.
You know? Who,
I saw a thing that, boy, it stopped me in my tracks early on during this whole season of protests after the George Floyd killing in Minnesota.
yeah.
When the demonstrations were beginning in some ways, wherever they are, to turn toward looting and violence or whatever
Mm-hmm.
was being reported, people were setting some fires or that sort of thing. And of course, that totally offends my sensibilities. I'm like, that's not the right way to do it. Let me tell you how to protest correctly. Which was the wrong reaction. And then I saw on Twitter somewhere this white mom somewhere who just said, look, I'm not for rioting, but let's be honest, if George Floyd were my son, I would have burned that whole city down.
Yeah.
Now, whether she was exaggerating or not, I suddenly felt compassion to be like, oh, I don't know what it's like. And so I'm going to take a step back here and I'm not going to judge how people are protesting. I'm just going to listen to what they're protesting about. Because given the same circumstances, I don't know what I would do.
How do we know how we
Yeah.
would react?
And chances are I'm so entitled and have such a sense of self and belovedness and made in the image of God, I might burn that whole city down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think I deserve justice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So the human heart is a complex thing.
it is.
And that's a way of saying that we all need this teaching.
Yeah.
We all need to understand that
Yeah.
Jesus needs to work on our heart.
Well, and that's the bit that's so great about that metaphor is that what Jesus is after is the acorn.
Yeah,
He's
right.
after the whole bit before you put it in any condition, so
Mhm.
that wherever you're put, you're the sort of person that reflects his kingdom
Right.
values. And that's what you get when people follow him and do it. And you see it in the Apostle Paul, who goes on to be a transformed person and say things like, I know what it's like to be content in all things. If I've got a lot or I've got a little, or if I'm being treated unjustly, or if I have power, it doesn't matter. I'm still going to act like Jesus. And it's as if Jesus got a hold of the acorn of his life and transformed it. So no matter where you put it, it produced kingdom fruit.
Right. Yeah. That's a good goal for all of us,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I mean, I think that's what it means with the Beatitudes is that we're going to work on your acorn. We're going to get down there and we're going to work on
I'm going
it.
to work on your acorn.
Yeah.
I see a new sign outside the church.
We're going to work on your acorn. That's so funny. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, should we wrap up with that, or
Well, let's leave off there. We've
Okay.
got a lot of antitheses to go through because I think this is the important stuff of the lived life in this new community of
Mhm.
the church and how we're going to live this out. Jesus doesn't leave us just with principles and abstractions. He's going to give us some real practical
yeah,
ways that this matters.
yeah? Well,
So-
I'll look forward to getting into it next
Okay.
time. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you, Rustin.
Yeah. Thanks for being here, John. And until next time.
Okay.
Amen.
Amen.